Owls in the Family, Chapter 9, Part 2. And I chose this picture today because the owlet is pretty much the size of the parent. And if you check the live OwlCam update, you will see that the 3 owlets on the OwlCam are pretty much the size of the parents. They don't look like the parents yet, but they are the same size. Okay, last time we touched on this, and if we go back to Stone Fox, remember a really big part of our Stone Fox project on the iPad and our presentation was literary elements. That means the main parts or components of a book, of a story, of a fictional novel. Remember we talked about the setting of Stone Fox. That was in Wyoming. Just go back and choose my color here. So we talked about that was a farm. It was Wyoming. There were the characters, Little Willie, Stone Fox, grandfather, and so on. Searchlight. There was a problem in the story. Remember they needed to get Grandpa better, and Grandpa was really worried about the money. And the solution was that Little Willie won the race and got the $500, and Grandpa got better. Okay, then the plot was all the different things that happened in the story from the beginning right through the middle and to the end. The conflict, remember there was conflict between Stone Fox and Little Willie. Stone Fox slapped Little Willie. And then there was a conflict of the race between Little Willie and Stone Fox, who would win. There was a conflict between Stone Fox, his tribe and people, with the white man about their land. There's all kinds of conflict in there. Then we talked about theme. You know, what was the big theme in the story? Was it family? Was it teamwork? Was it determination? And then we talked about climax, which was the most exciting part of the story, and that comes just before the solution near the end of the book. And that's sort of where we're getting to in this book. Although this book is very different than Stone Fox. So Stone Fox was really about action, lots of things happening. Who's going to win? And we're just hanging on the edge of our seats. Who's going to win? Is grandfather going to get better? Is Little Willie going to win that money? And we're just reading and reading and reading. And then it gets really exciting when the race is happening. Okay. So the book we're reading now, Owls in the Family, it doesn't quite work that same way. It still has all these elements, but I think in this book, I'm super more interested in the characters of the owls and the kids and all the people and just all the little problems and solutions that Wool and Weeps and Billy have. And I think the theme is really cool as well about how animals and people interact, okay, and how they solve their own problems, right? There's so many adventures and they have to solve their own problems. So even though those literary elements are in every book, some of them might be more important in some books than others. We also talked about last time literary devices, the way the author uses language. We talked about similes, as sly as a fox. So making us have a picture or thinking of an animal and using the word as or the word like. And you guys came up with some really good ones after reading yesterday. Something we haven't talked about is a metaphor, which is pretty similar to a simile. The calm lake was a mirror. So it's comparing the calm lake to a mirror, same, comparing, but it does not use like or as. It just says it was a mirror. So those two are really similar. They're both comparisons, and they both help us make pictures in our mind, okay? Now you might have watched movies where you have seen these flashbacks. So you'll be watching the movie and then all of a sudden it shows the character as a much younger person and it shows you what happened a long time ago, and then it goes back to the regular story. So that can happen in books as well. You can be reading and then all of a sudden You're reading about when the character was really little and something happened to him, and then you're right back to reading the story again. So flashbacks can be in there. Foreshadowing. I love this word because it has the word shadow in it. But a shadow is a hint of something. It's not the real thing. And foreshadowing is when they put a hint at the beginning or earlier on of something that is going to happen later. So for instance, they might show, if it's a murder mystery or something like that, they might show a hint of the evilness in one particular character, and then later on we find out that they were the murderer or the bad person. Okay, so it's just like a little hint that the author puts there, and sometimes you don't even think about it until later on, right at the end of the book. Alliteration is a really fun one that some authors use. This author in Owls in the Family does not, but we read a book where they had some alliteration. Mr. Popper's Penguins. And alliteration is when you use the same letter at the beginning of words, and so you get that pop of the same sound over and over again. It's really interesting to listen to. Our ear kind of is attracted to that. And I don't know if you remember in the movie we watched of Mr. Popper's Penguins, I think it was the secretary in the movie, and every single word she could that started with P, she used it. So all of her sentences had as many words that started with P as possible. So she used alliteration quite a bit. Okay. And then remember the seals in Mr. Popper's Penguins. I can't remember what their full name was, but there was a lot of S's in their name. I can't remember that one. Okay. But it was like something seals. And so they used the S over and over again. Okay, now one other one that our author, Farley Mowat, the author of our book, Owls in the Family, uses besides similes is he uses this one, and this is a fantastic word, onomatopoeia. So say that with me, onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. What a great spelling word as well. Too bad we're not doing spelling tests. Now, onomatopoeia is a made-up word. Okay, obviously somebody had fun making that up, but it is exactly what it sounds like. Onomatopoeia is when the author uses a word that imitates the sound. So when you hear a cannon boom, that sounds like the word boom. That's the sound that it makes. If you hear electricity zapping, it sounds like z. You can hear that z sound in there, zap. And so the word sounds like the sound that is actually happening. Okay, so any words like that, boom, zap, those are examples of onomatopoeia. Now, Farley Mowat, I said, uses similes and he uses onomatopoeia. And here are some words that he has used so far in the book. Squawk, shriek, squoosh. And those sound very similar to the sounds that he's trying to describe. Now you have a very simple job today. Your job is to find one word. I am going to be reading the second part of chapter 9, and there is a word that sounds like the sound that it makes. And you are listening for that word today. Our owls were so used to going nearly everywhere with me now that when school started that fall, I had a hard time keeping them at home. I used to bicycle to school, which was about 2 miles away across the river. During the first week after school opened, I was late 4 times because of having to take the owls back home after they had followed me part way. Finally, Dad suggested that I lock them up in the big pen each morning just before I left. Wool and Weeps hadn't used that pen for a long time, and when I put them in, they acted as if it was a jail. Wool was particularly furious, and he began to tear at the chicken wire with his beak and claws. I sneaked off fast. I was almost late anyway, and I knew if I was late once more, I'd be kept in after school. So remember your job, boys and girls. You're listening for onomatopoeia, a word that sounds like the word itself. I was about halfway over the river bridge when a man on the footpath gave a shout and pointed to something behind my back. At the same time, a car coming toward me jammed on its brakes and nearly skidded into the cement railings. Not knowing what was going on, I put on my brakes too, and I just had time to stop when there was a wild rush of air on the back of my neck, a deep hoo-hoo in my ear, and Wool landed on my shoulder. He was out of breath, but he was so pleased with himself that I didn't have the heart to take him home. Anyway, there wasn't time, so he rode the handlebars the rest of the way to school. So boys and girls, just so you know, we have not found that word yet. Okay? I skidded into the yard just as the 2-minute bell was ringing, and all the other kids were going through the doors. I couldn't decide what on earth to do with Wool. Then I remembered that I had some twine in my pocket. I fished it out and used it to tie him by one leg to the handlebars. The first class I had that morning was French. Well, between worrying about Wool and not having done my homework, I was soon in trouble with the teacher, whom we called Fifi behind her back. Fifi made me come up in front of the class so she could tell me how dumb I was. I was standing beside her desk wishing the floor would open and swallow me up when there was a whoomp, whoomp, whoomp at the window. I turned my head to look, and there sat Wool. It hadn't taken him long to untie the twine. I heard later that he had banged on the windows of 2 or 3 other classrooms before he found the right one. Having found the right one at last, he didn't waste any time. Unluckily, Fifi had left one of our windows open. Wool ducked down, saw me, and flew right in. And boys and girls, you should have found the word on this page. He was probably aiming to land on my shoulder, but he missed and at last second tried to land on Fifi's desk. It was a polished hardwood desk. He couldn't get a grip on it. His brakes just wouldn't hold. He skated straight across the desk, scattering papers and books all over the floor. Fifi saw him coming and tried to get up out of her chair, but she wasn't fast enough. Wool skidded off the end of the desk and plumped right into her lap. There were some ructions after that. I was sent to the principal's office, and Fifi went home for the rest of the day. And boys and girls, I don't know if you made a picture of that in your mind while I was reading it, but it's a really awesome picture. So think about a desk, and there's the teacher sitting right there on the chair. And here's Wool coming in, right? There's Wool coming in, talons, and he screeches, comes in, slides right across the desk, books flying everywhere, and plump, lands right on the teacher's lap. That'd be a good action scene. Okay, here's your only job for today is to write one word. Find the onomatopoeia. Which word sounds like the sound it makes? Good luck.